All right. Sarah, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I'm a big fan of the show. Loved your performance in it. So, first and foremost, congratulations.
Thank you.
So, were you familiar with Cheryl Strayed's Tiny Beautiful Things before joining the show?
I think when I started familiarizing myself with it, a few of the stories, a few of the letters and responses sounded were familiar to me. But before that, I had seen Wild in theaters, I guess about 10 years ago, and the friend that I saw it with actually went to hike the PCT the same year that I did Tiny Beautiful Things. So it was sort of a full circle moment in that way. But then obviously once I got attached to this project, and before I actually got the job, I started reading Tiny Beautiful Things, and yeah, it was incredible. It's now recommended reading, I think, to anyone I meet, and not just because I was in the show.
Well, when you read the book, what compelled you the most while reading it?
I think I definitely have a favorite letter and response. And I think what over and over again, you would start reading a letter and you would think like, this isn't gonna relate to me. This isn't about my life. This isn't my struggle. And then Cheryl's answer would be so universal, that I just found myself sitting there after reading her response, thinking like, how did she make this something that I needed to hear? And how is someone's life who I would not consider anything like my own somehow resonating with me? So I think that's what excites you so much about reading this. It's like all of her responses are feel like something you need to hear and you didn't know that you needed it. Um, and I in particular like the ghost ship, which is one of something that we use in the series. Yeah, I think it's a beautiful idea. This sense of all the other choices that you could make. There's sort of no use in like beating yourself over not you don't know what life you don't choose, and all you can do is salute it from the shore. I think that's a beautiful idea.
So, when you eventually landed the role, I'm wondering what were your first conversations like with showrunner Liz Tigalar?
I mean, she's just so incredibly warm. She's an amazing individual as well as incredibly talented writer. It was everyone kept saying, it's going to be a beautiful summer. And from the moment she welcomed me to this project, it was just that. It was something that, so welcoming, so engaging, so excited. And I think that set the tone because this story is not light. Although there are some really hilarious moments in it. It's heavy material that we're dealing with, and I think that just absolute warmth and love that was immediately clear upon joining the project, carried through toward till the end of shooting. Um, yeah, it was incredible. I felt lucky from the jump.
Now, much of what is in your arc as the younger version of Clare mirrors what Kathryn Hahn's story goes to as a present day Clare. I'm wondering if you collaborated with her at all, and what was that process with her like?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had a lot of conversations, and we also had workshops that included sometimes just a few of us, and then also, not that our core cast was incredibly large. I think, it included Catherine, Merritt, Quentin, Owen, Tanzan, and through that, we worked with someone named Kim Gillingham, and she really helped us find, I think, the tone and the vibe of the show and what this world was, encouraged us to bring our own experiences to this project. And I think by having these sort of individual, unique experiences from our own life and meeting these characters, we were able to sort of approach this work with a really open heartedness and through that, Kathryn and I found a physical vocabulary. And I think more than anything, we had this writing that allowed this through line for these people, that over close to 25 years, the things that made them tick were similar. It carried through, and this, how she related to her mother, was very consistent from the moment she loses her to where we see Kathryn in her storyline. So I was just very lucky that Kathryn was so, like Liz, so open, so kind, so willing to collaborate and communicate. And I think it made me feel less fearful and more encouraged to dive into it and, bring these rougher edges of myself and my own experience to this character. And I think that's also where a lot of our similarities are, that the live wire that is Clare, I think Kathryn and I brought what that meant to us, and it was able to exist in that commonality together.
Now, there are moments in the final episode where the younger version of Clare sort of briefly appears, I think with Ray, and even when she confronts Lucas and her father at the end. I'm wondering, like, in these specific moments, how did you want your portrayal of the character sort of coalesce with what Kathryn was doing?
Well, Owen and I were on set, and we actually weren't supposed to watch them. So we didn't get to see our older selves take on this scene, because I think there was an effort to that, people do change over 20 years, and the way that you communicate with someone changes. Although, I don't know. So I have a sister, and sometimes I feel like I still fight and communicate with her like I'm 10 and she's 13. But I think in particular that her dad was there. It's a different relationship. There was a moment when he turns around, and happy birthday. We had a couple different takes of, does she have that absolute, like, is he like vinegar to her, just hate. And I think what ended was a take that we did where it was slightly more vulnerable, that, like, she's still in that fresh loss of her mother, and there's still that little girl that, as terrible as her father was, still had this like confused yearning for a parent, and he was there. So it was encouraged, I think, for us to have our own takes on that. But I think what's so powerful about that moment is that these different versions of yourself, exist in the present, like they do in all of us. We're some of all of our parts. And I think that was that final scene, it's such a great buildup and such a wonderful finale, because it captures what that is.
And, your arc is more focused on Claire's relationship with her mother and her brother. And so I'm wondering, how did you sort of want to paint those respective relationships with Merritt and Owen throughout the show?
I mean, it was so, in some ways, easy because I was given such incredible scene partners. You just look at Merritt Weaver, and she just radiates a beautiful energy. It's like, how can you not fall in love with this person? And same thing goes for Owen Painter. It's like, it's such a dance between two people. And I was just gifted with such beautiful partners, and they informed so much of, you're sitting there and thinking, oh, this is how she was mothered, and this is who your sibling is, and they tell you so much of what you need to know. It's such an incredible mirror. And I think that as the story went on, and we saw how Lucas distances himself from the diagnosis and Claire throws herself at it. I think that started forming a really interesting dynamic of this is how two people that grew up in the same home that have really similar experiences deal with a problem so vastly differently. And then with Merritt, something that I think, with Frankie's storyline in particular, there's that similarity with getting married young and seeing how those two butt heads and how they see their lives in different ways. I think once again, we had a great script. We had great script and there was an incredible cast. And I don't know if it was anything really conscious that I did, but I just relished in, what was present on the day.
So when you do read a script like that, how do you sort of unpeel all the multiple layers of Claire's journey?
It's hard because I think that Claire sometimes, she, like all of us, we do things and we don't know why we do them. And, in particular, I had a conversation with Cheryl because I said, I know what the magnitude of this loss feels like, but I don't have the same story in the sense that, I watched someone pass and I watched cancer take someone away. And, why does she have affairs with people outside of her marriage? Why is she keeping secrets from her husband? Why is she failing school? Why, she does so many things to distract herself from this insane loss. And something that Cheryl said was, I had to blow up my life to show how much my mom mattered. And I think that was something that allowed me, that it didn't necessarily need to be this calculation of why she's doing these things. It's just this motor that is within Claire, and finding that and letting that be the fuel. What also lent itself to that is that the story is told, it's not linear. We flash back to the way past when she gets into college and, even when she's 11. And I think once again, it wasn't this, especially because the story is one about someone who is, she's all of these things all at once, and it's not clean and it's not pretty and it's not in this tiny little box. That I think it allowed me to not really feel like she had to be this measured person. Yeah, I think just going back to a lot of what those workshops were, and really grounding myself in that feeling of that, this is this world and this is how these people communicate with each other, and these are the things that are important to them, because then when they fall away, the loss of those people is so much stronger.
So, like you've mentioned previously, this show deals with a lot. It's very sort of emotionally complex. It has some very tender and poignant moments, where we see Claire's love for her mother, but it also tackles the subjects of grief and unprocessed trauma head on. Claire's past is really filled with some really beautiful moments, but it's also extremely dark, and it really isn't afraid of showing that. So was it really difficult to showcase this sort of difference between a more sort of joyous version of Claire when she's with her mother, or in college, for example, with her mother, or spending sort of very close time with her versus when she has to process that grief? I don't know if it's clear. Yeah,
it is. That's clear. I think it was a little difficult. My first day on set was at the funeral. So that's how I really, being in this person's, this clothing and these shoes and in this environment, your first introduction is days after death. And I think I got to know her in that way, so that when these lighter moments came on, it came about, I think I was a little scared to, like who is this person who's light, and who is this person that's just a teenager and who's excited about college and who doesn't want her mom to go to college and who hates her Christmas present. And, I think there were some moments where it felt like that was, maybe stickier to get into than something that was familiar of, holding on to this, a feeling of wanting to like guilt my brother for having me miss my mother's passing, to the recklessness that comes, after she arrives at the funeral home. Those felt more like I knew who that was. Even though each of those scenes is different, I think the moments where everything is okay for a second were some of the more difficult moments. I don't think I'm alone in this, that it's like really hard to fake joy. It's really hard to fake a laugh. And I would argue that it's easier to, we all want to, at least for me, I want to go to the sad and the drama. Because I think in some ways, like true joy can be a lot more vulnerable. But that being said, I was so excited for those moments. And I think there are some funny moments. And also those lighter moments that come in the grief. Because it's also this idea that if you don't laugh, then you're going to cry. And you have to deflect it with, like what she says at the funeral home. Things like that. So I also welcomed those moments, even though they made me kind of nervous sometimes.
And were there any scenes that you found most difficult to film?
I guess the most. No, they were all hard. Which is I loved the show so much because there were so many different versions of this person. You see her in so many different points in her life. So it was just it was just so exciting. I think it was hard to play. I think maybe getting ready to go out with her friend Amy when she's deciding whether or not she's going to keep the baby. I think because that's just how Claire handles that. And then the scene that comes after with Danny, it's like she's really figuring it out in real time and also like not really coming to any conclusions. And even in that scene with Danny, when she does decide to keep the baby, she doesn't even say that she's going to. So I think that was I guess that was maybe a time where I like sort of measured like where is she at in this thinking and what is motivating her, and because it also ties in so much to being mothered and mothering, starting a family when you lose someone so important in your own. So I guess that was hard. And also a scene that was hard was sitting in the bed with Owen after he finally shows up and we're about to go to the hospital the next day. I think just that stillness and, it wasn't a high. It wasn't this moment of conflict. It was sort of when they're just both too tired to do that and they're just sitting with it. I think that was hard because it's hard to sit with an emotion and not do anything about it. That's like the opposite of what anyone wants to do, especially if it's a negative feeling. You want to you want to deal with it. You want to be done with it.
Yeah. And, like I said, this show is a lot emotionally, but, you can also grasp a lot of things out of the show. And so I'm wondering, just as a last question, what do you hope audiences ultimately grasp out of Tiny Beautiful Things?
I think that grief is something we all hold. And it is something that I think most of us want to shy away from and not deal with head on because it is so multifaceted, and it brings up guilt, it brings up shame, it brings up joy, it brings up sadness because you can no longer experience that joy. It's like there's so many different parts of it that make it so difficult to face. And I think a lot of times we pull ourselves away from it. And I think that grief can be a very beautiful thing. And I think that's what this show is about, as ugly as it can be, as, it can cause some damage depending on how we deal with it or process it. Just the grief in itself is damaging. But I hope that in people watching this is that they recognize their own grief, that that just ignoring it doesn't mean it's not there, and that by getting familiar with it, it can be very beautiful. And I think I just want people to get a little bit, get familiar with that, and realizing just how, the beautiful part about it is, in particular, the grieving someone and the loss of someone, is that they were so important. They were so beautiful in your life, and how beautiful it is to miss someone so much. But on top of, I think I answered something similar. I was with Cheryl doing a panel, and her answer is so much better than mine because it's Cheryl Strayed. And she said, when I write a book, I want people to turn the page. When thinking of TV, I want people to want to watch the next episode. And whatever it is to someone, that's what it is. And that's what they should get from it. So I think there's also something to that whatever people feel, that's what I want it to be, because I guess whatever they're feeling is probably what they needed to experience. So yeah, that's my two-pronged answer.
So it was really great talking to you, Sarah, today. Congratulations once again on the show. It was really good. You were really great in it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.